You are listening to the Sky Genie Show, Holiday Edition. Hit the music! The following may not be suitable for children under the age of 18. It contains personal views and opinions, coarse language, and sexual themes. All characters of the show are fictional and made for comedy satire, not harm. Hello and welcome to the holiday edition of the Sky Genie Show. It's the long weekend, so the regular show will be back next Wednesday night, Australian Standard Time, which will feature me, the Sky Genie, and the new edition, Tough Love. For those of you who have missed it, check out episode 41, where Tough Love made her debut. The Sky Genie Show, and pretty much broadcasting or podcasting in general. Now, for anyone not familiar with this version of the show, the Holiday Edition is a show looking back at old wrestling footage from years ago to see how they stand up now. So it's a bit of nostalgia and bit of history in this show. And I try to run down the card or run down what the territory or the company was doing at that time. If I can, what they do from a year from now, etc., etc. The thing about this show, you don't actually know what I am going to review until I do it. Keep the element of surprise. But for this episode of the Sky Genie Show, I figured about doing a theme. And this episode's theme is about territories. The territory system in professional wrestling dated back decades. Unlike what you see today with the WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, and all these other shows, back in the 80s and going further, wrestling was all in territories. You would go somewhere and apply your craft, and once you got to a point in a territory where you weren't going to get any higher, or you didn't like your situation in the territory, you would leave and go to another territory and try the same thing there. A lot of wrestlers made their shtick doing that. The Fabulous Freebirds, the Funks, the Briscoes, the Ric Flairs, the Dusty Rhodes, the Harley Racers, all of that. So, after the break, will be the first review for the Holiday Edition. We here at the Sky Genie Show would like to wish you all a happy Easter. If you are travelling over this weekend, please travel safe. If you're looking for a very professional show to listen to the Solomonster Sounds off. His show, smokes this one entirely, is a very informative show. Join Jason Solomon as he gives his thoughts on the current events of professional wrestling. Catch his show on Podbean, Stitcher or iTunes. Also check out Jason Solomon's YouTube page where he does extras for pay-per-view shows or interviews with wrestlers in the business. Jason has interviewed the likes of Diamond Dallas Page, Bob Hardcore Holly, the legendary Jim Ross, and even Booker T. Definitely a show worth checking out. And we are back, and it's time for the first review. It is Mid-South Wrestling from December 12th, 1981. Mid-South Wrestling was a territory run by Bill Watts. And around this time, we were in the rise of probably the peak of the Junkyard Dog. But the Mid-South territory was known for its hard-nosed Bill Watts, who would give out fines to wrestlers if they're doing stupid shit or shit he didn't like. A lot of wrestlers actually learnt about the business from Bill Watts by doing that, and was considered a great territory for young talent to learn. But let's get into the show, shall we? The show opens up with Boyd Pierce and Ernie Ladd on commentary running down the card. First up, we had The Monk versus Brian Blair. Killer B, Brian Blair. It was a really good match, and your winner was Brian Blair. Following this, The Monk, I just don't know what happened to The Monk, but for Brian Blair, he would end up going to the AWA before going to the WWE, becoming a Killer B. We then go to the next match, Tom Rosento Jr. versus King Cobra. And this was an okay match. Your winner was King Cobra. No info on what happened to these guys after the match. We then had Ed Wiskoski versus Jim Garvin. In a pretty terrible match, your winner was Ed Wiskoski. After this match, Ed Wiskoski, obviously went nowhere, probably retired after this. As for Jimmy Garvin, he would go on to become Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin in the World Class Championship Wrestling. They show a video package of the Junkyard Dog versus Terry Orndorff, who is the real-life brother of Paul Orndorff. Doing some research on Terry Orndorff, he was in the business for a little while, but didn't have the passion for it like Paul Orndorff did, which is why you never see much after this. We then had Aaron Holt and Jerry Novak versus the JYD and Mike George. In a squash match, JYD and Mike George wins. No idea what happens to the other three, but the Junkyard Dog obviously becomes the biggest star in the territory, then goes to the WWE to have even bigger success. We then had Buddy Ryan versus the Iron Sheik. After a squash match, the Iron Sheik wins. After this match, no idea what happens to Buddy Ryan, but the Iron Sheik would go on to beat Bob Backlund for the WWE Championship after a 6-year reign. Impressive, huh? We then had Diamond Lil and Rick Ferreira versus Barbie Doll and Tony Charles in a mixed tag team match. The winners were Barbie Doll and Tony Charles. My thoughts on the match were midgets! No idea what happens to them all after the match. And then we come to the main event. It was Ted DiBiase as a babyface versus Paul Orndorff. That went to a time limit draw in an awesome main event that really stands up now. I mean, Ted DiBiase and Paul Orndorff were really workhorses, and you can see how they had success here. Makes you wish they had success in the WWE as world champions, but that's the breaks. Overall, it was an okay show, but the main event was the best match on the show. A year from now, Ted DiBiase would turn heel and feud with the Junkyard Dog. As for Paul Orndorff, he would leave and go to Georgia. And that is the review of Mid-South Wrestling, December 12th, 1981. Don't go away, because there's more after the break. For fans of the show, please also check out the Don, Tony, and Kevin Castle show. Don, Tony, and Kevin Castle show is a hard-hitting, with brutal honesty type show, as they give their views on the world of professional wrestling and WWE. They're also on Stitcher and iTunes. If you want to catch them live, listen to them on Mixlr. Are you looking for a good laugh? Then check out Getting the Corner. Getting the Corner. Da Corner. Da Corner. With hosts Yuck Nasty and Dogger Baby. Every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. on Mixlr. Check them out on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on Mixlr. And we are back, and now it's time for the next review. For our next review will be from World Class Championship Wrestling on the 15th of October 1982. World Class Championship Wrestling was home of the Von Erichs. Now, this was before the feud with the Fabulous Freebirds, and on this episode, it's Michael Hayes who makes his debut for World Class Championship Wrestling in a match, and is pushed as a babyface. Interesting. But anyway, let's get on with the show. The show opens up with Bill Mercer and Jay Salty, who run down the card. They bring in Harvey Martin. I have no idea who he is. So let's get on with the first match. It was Captain Frank Gusick. Yep, that's what they said. Versus David Von Erich. After a pretty good match, your winner is David Von Erich. A year from now, Captain Frank Gusick, I don't know. I have no idea who he is, and before or since, so couldn't do the research. As for David Von Erich, he would go on to feud with the Fabulous Freebirds, but sadly pass away before getting the chance to face Ric Flair for the NWA World Championship. Next match, we had Jose Lothario and Al Madril versus the Magic Dragon and the Checkmate. After a boring match, the match went to a time limit. After this match, Magic Dragon and Checkmate have no history. Jose Lothario would go on to train Shawn Michaels, and Al Madril would continue to wrestle in World Class Championship Wrestling. We then get an interview with the Nature Boy Ric Flair, responding to allegations that he put a hit on Kerry Von Erich to injure his knee, and hired Gary Hart and the Great Kabuki to do it. Flair is denying all this, saying that he doesn't need anybody to take out Kerry Von Erich for him, because Ric Flair is the world champion. So we go on to the next match. We have the Grand Marcus II versus the Samoan. After a good match, the Grand Marcus II wins. I could not find any information on either of these two, and I don't know who they were, so I don't know any info going forward with these people. The next match, we had the Great Rosento versus Michael Hayes. After a squash match, Michael Hayes wins. After the match, Rosento goes to attack Michael Hayes, but Hayes counters and throws him out of the ring. Michael Hayes grabs the microphone and announces that the Freebirds are coming to World Class Championship Wrestling. Overall, it was an okay show that built two big things yet to come. And that is the World Class Championship Wrestling review for the 15th of October 1982. After the break, more of the holiday edition. For fans of the Sky Genie Show, please also make sure to check out Wrestling Soup. They drop at 9:30 on Thursday. Join hosts Anthony Missionary Thomas and Joey Numbers as they lightheartedly talk about the world that's happening in professional wrestling, as well as other current events. While over there, please make sure to check out the Saturday Morning Shitbox. Have your voice and question heard as Mish and Joey answer questions on their thoughts of professional wrestling or anything else going around in the world. That show drops on Saturday morning-ish. The weeks it doesn't air is because they're doing pay-per-view Sunday. Yes, whenever there's a WWE pay-per-view, Mish and Joey usually review it, sometimes with John Draper. They also have shows on Stitcher and iTunes. If you want to catch the boys live, check them out on Mixlr. For interesting discussion and debates on professional wrestling, check out Johnny Florida, Michael Corvin, and Old Man Jenkins on Wrestling's National Committee. They talk a wide range of topics on the world that is pro wrestling. Check them out on Wednesday at 9 p.m. on Mixlr. And we are back, and now it's time for the next review. The next review is from the AWA for March 4th, 1986. The AWA was run by Vern Gagne, who would go on to be a 10-time AWA World Heavyweight Champion. And for years, the AWA was probably the first territory or company to be shown on national television. There is a who's who of legends that wrestled in the AWA. People like Nick Bockwinkel, Stan the Lariat Hansen, the Iron Sheik. Even Hulk Hogan started Hulkamania in the AWA. Ric Flair was trained by Vern Gagne and got his start in the AWA. At this point in 1986, the WWE's national expansion was in full effect, and the AWA was going through a youth movement. Now, at this point, there was still a few green guys, but not draws that would compare to Hulk Hogan. The AWA was kind of behind the times with a lot of shit, but looking at this card here, it looked like there was pretty good potential, and it's pretty sad that the AWA never capitalized on these stars going forward, because pretty much all the people on this show were future Hall of Famers. But anyway, let's get into the show. The show opens up with Larry Nelson, who interviews Jackie Moore as they run down the card. So we go to the first match. It's Buddha Khan versus Shawn Michaels in his AWA debut. It was a good match, but you see Shawn Michaels was very green here. Your winner was Shawn Michaels. Don't know what happened to Buddha Khan after this. As for Shawn Michaels, he would go on to form a tag team with the Rockers and win the AWA Tag Team Championship. And then would go on to the WWE to have even bigger success. After the match, they interview Shawn Michaels, who has views for the Tag Team Championship. More at the end of the show. We then have Tim Patterson and Bun Boy Barton, some names, versus the Long Riders of Wild Bill Irwin and Scott Irwin. The match was pretty meh, but the Long Riders got the win. After the match, they interviewed the Long Riders. A year from now, Scott Irwin would sadly pass away due to a car accident. As for the other two, I have no idea. While Bill Irwin would go to World Class Championship Wrestling after this. Run is over. Moving on, we had Doug Summers versus one half of the AWA World Tag Team Champions, Scott Hall. Was Tag Team Champions with Kurt Hennig. After a really great match, Scott Hall gets the win. After the match, they interview the tag champs, Hall and Hennig. A year from now, Doug Summers would team with Pat Rose, and they would win the AWA Tag Team Championship and feud with the Midnight Rockers. As for Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig, while they'll continue to wrestle in the AWA for a little bit more, Kurt Hennig would win the AWA Championship from Nick Bockwinkel. I think the reigning champion at this point was Stan Hansen, but Kurt Angle would win it from Nick Bockwinkel. Scott Hall would go to the NWA, then go to WWE as Razor Ramon. Then at the end of the show, they have sort of a talk show format. Larry Nelson and Larry Zbyszko have a video package of debuting Marty Jannetty. They interview Jannetty, and he announces that he is forming a tag team with Shawn Michaels. Interesting. That was pretty much it for those shows. So overall, it was an interesting show that focused on guys for the future. Now, it's very rare that you watch a lot of old territories and they don't put any emphasis on new guys. They just go with guys that they know can draw, and that's about it. But here you had guys that were obviously going to be stars in the 90s. I think it's sad that 1986 is a very underrated year for the AWA in forms of new, improved, and great talent. But that is my review of the AWA of March 4th, 1986. And that'll be it for this episode of the Holiday Edition. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Go to my website, skygenieshow.weebly.com. On Facebook, it's the Sky Genie Show page. And on Twitter, it's SDD916. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I'll catch you later.